This is part 6 of Sanctification from Adultery and Marriage Teaching for USA, Western World, and young people. So, this portion of it addresses adultery in the church. Often, this adultery in the church that I'm going to touch on, or the adulterers in the church, or adulterous things done by vessels in the church, often go undetected, or they don't preach about it, they don't teach about it, they don't discuss those things. And so people are doing it and not knowing it's not pleasing to the Lord. Okay. So, one of the things that I'll touch on first is the fact that people are attending Christian congregations. I'm not saying all of them are committing adultery, but you may find people are doing adulterous things and still attending church congregations or synagogues or mosques. And they don't know, right, that it's an adulterous thing before God. So, and they're doing certain things that they don't know is adulterous, or they're attending certain congregations where many of the members are adulterers and they don't know. Okay. I'll start off by saying how the Spirit of the Lord led me to where it says, "Thou hast been partakers with adulterers." So, what comes to mind, and if you listen to part 1 to part 5, you'll know about Ian Main. What would come to mind would be Ian Main. But then the more the Lord sanctified me and the more I sought the Lord on certain things that happened to me in 2017 and 2016, that even when I was attending PTA Orlando, like when I sought God about Simona within recent years, I was led to the section in the book Wayward Woman, who was a competitive person and an adulterer, according to, I believe it's in Proverbs 6. And so I did not know that. And then I believe the pastor, Pastor Francis, married twice. And so I don't even know if her second marriage is approved by God. You know, some people, they may marry before they come into Christ and then they get married again to someone who they think is more godly, but it may not be God's will. And they may be adulterers before God and just don't know. And that happens. And there are some who were in some violent, and I did discuss this in what video, they may have been married to someone who was violent. They were unsanctified. They were an unsanctified person. Instead of saying separated, they decide that, oh, that marriage was not from God. And in some cases, it's true, it's not from God. But in some cases, it's not God's will for them to go off and marry another. The person just needs to be sanctified. And some of the women may go off and marry another, someone who is in Christ or in the church or in God, and maybe a pastor or somebody, and they may think that this is God's will. The key thing is to seek God. Know before you go, not just go off by your feelings or your experiences. Okay? Because if Satan could make domestic violence happen to every God-given marriage, he would, and cause the women or the men to think that it's just like in Malachi 2, put them away and then go marry another and then say, oh, this second time around I'm doing better in this relationship, it must be God. And it may not be God's will, just as God hated the putting away in Malachi 2. So by grace, we're saved, right? Many of us are saved. So some people are doing this, and God is being gracious to them because they probably know that the first husband is going to die soon. And then in some cases, as I have sought God on certain things, certain relationships, pastors and their pastors and whatever, and they married again, God will reveal to me, no, something about darkness. Not every relationship that just because they married to someone and they feel much better in that relationship because the other one had contention, that it's approvable before God. And some of them know that. They know that, but they'll fight you. They fought me. He was not too fond of me. But I know now because he had an issue with God. And when you hate God, you'll hate the vessels that stand for righteousness. And you'll try to embarrass. That's one of the tactics that they have, embarrassment. Anyway, I was one of the educators or during my, I guess, college years that I did a lesson on how to overcome embarrassment. So Simona and them, you can't stop me. Okay, so Psalm 50 verse 18 touches on, thou hast been partakers with adulterers, and God will lead me to that. And it's like, one of the things that I learned from E.F. Maine is that, he would be in one church, they'll get married, get a divorce, and then they'll go to another church, and then they'll get married. And so you have them, like, they do that in the UPC too. Like, they'll get married in one UPC church, divorce, and then go to another UPC church and get married. And then they find out sometime probably after, oh, he was married before. And, all that kind of stuff is devastating when you find out after. Or he was married in Jamaica, or he has the mother of his babies in Jamaica, some stuff like that. Because, they do commit adultery to come into America. That's why they have all this poor America. They have these agencies, and they have in like immigration investigation when it comes to marriage, because some people commit adultery to come into America, then they divorce the person and then just live in America just to get a better life. Okay? So you have that happening, okay? So in Florida, one of the things that I noticed, especially in between 2019 and 2022 or so, I would be led to where it says in the scriptures, and I believe it's 2 Corinthians 6 verse 17, come out from among them and be ye separated. I would often see that, and I don't do much like church homework. And so I don't do much church homework. And so it's like, what? Like, I don't really have friends who are adulterous like that. And I basically, more of the people I hang around with, they're elderly women, so it's not them. Many of them are single. And so it's like, what is this? And it could be more so that I would visit certain congregations, not every congregation now, but certain congregations, and I don't know that these people are adulterous, and they are. Right? Because you go to the house of the Lord, and sometimes you believe that all these people really mean God. So 2 Corinthians 6 verse 17, wherefore come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. See? and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, said the Lord Almighty. So some people, like, I went to this congregation and I went for prayer, and my heart was so broken after Christopher Delgado did the whole "I love you but I can't be with you." I think I was just laying down um, for about a week or two afterwards. It affected me a lot because I don't want to be separated from him. And even when I sought the Lord, um, like, I guess what God would have want Chris and I to do, and I was led to where it says reconcile, wherever, reconcile more than once. And I think we forgive one another and reconcile. That's God's will. But before that, when I was in New York and I was led to certain things, it was like dwelling in solitude, and then the devotion on dwelling in solitude and getting sanctification. So the will of the Lord is for us to reconcile, but I've done my best. If Christopher Delgado decides whatever, pardon me, to continue to be separated, I mean, he has the consequences to dwell to bear for that, because there is no God-given reason for him to separate from me, especially if he couldn't tell me anything. There was no reason. So anyway, so I remember going to this church. Ian Main went to the church. So Ian Main is behind me, and he puts his hand on my back, and I guess he helps with the prayer at that church at one point. I don't know if he still goes there. And the pastors before of that church is before me and praying for me like this. I had no clue Ian Main was like a full-blown adulterer, and he's just doing this. This is the problem more than likely here in Florida, because that's what I was led to, like, more than once, especially between 2019 and 2022. So some congregations, you just don't know that they're adulterers. They may be married or whatever. You don't know about their past history or whatever, or they may be doing adulterous things you don't know, and you're receiving them. And that's something I want to touch on. Greetings in the church. Now they like you to shake hands or greet somebody in Jesus' name. Tell them that you love them in Jesus. And the adulterers, they love that because a lot of them want to be accepted, right? That's why they go to a different church too. Some of them want to be accepted. I'm already accepted in the beloved, so I know I'm in the body of Christ, and the body of Christ is huge. And so I visit different churches, and I fellowship with godly saints, and I see the Spirit of God move. So no, I'm if you reject me, it's like, oh, it's okay. I learned, and the Spirit of the Lord led me to where you just shake the dust off your feet when people reject you. So he taught me how to deal with rejection. That's another thing. So no, I'm not moved by Simona or Christopher Delgado's little "I love you but I can't be with you," especially because the Lord sanctified me on the matter. So anyway, greetings in the church, because you do know that Satan too wants people to feel perpetual rejection to the point that they hate themselves and commit suicide. So I'm not moved by Pastor Francis's whatever. I grew up in the church. I've seen Pentecost and know true Christianity, and when the Spirit of the Lord moves, I'm not moved by that. So greetings in the church. So they want you to shake hands. So the Lord sanctified me and dealt with me on bearing my vessel in sanctification and honor. So, some people may ask me if I'm Muslim. But, when you really look into what Islam is, what Muhammad did, he was reading the holy word. So he is pretty much, and he got some convictions from it, and a lot of it is Judaic. So, and Jesus was a Jew. So basically, same thing. So why all the fighting? We supposed to be brethren, walking in love and peace. That's so I'm not with this war in the Middle East. Satan has been trying to attack the Middle East so many times for it to be in war, and it does not need to be in war. I am not with this fighting. The bread Israel need to dwell with their neighbors, and their neighbors need to dwell with Israel peacefully. It is possible. Um. So thou that oh, I'm not going to touch on that yet. Greetings in the church, shaking hands. So I'm going to go to Proverbs 17, verse 18. Proverbs 17, 18. Okay, so this shaking hand culture, where did it come from? This shaking hand culture. You could greet somebody and you don't have to touch them. Not everybody you need to touch, right? And so, in Islam, they have that kind of similar thing where, if it's a woman outside of your immediate family, they, a lot of them refrain from touching. Some shake hands, some don't. And then you have the strict Judaic culture too, that they don't, the women don't touch the men don't touch the women. They're separate. They're sitting separately in the congregations, etc., etc. So it all comes to full circle. So when you're really about God and really mean God, you would see how we're supposed to dwell in the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So, that example of the Abrahamic Center in the UAE is a model, is an example, is beautiful. And so, yes, that's how we're supposed to dwell one with another. Um, Proverbs 17, verse 18. What does it say? A man void of understanding striketh hands, right? So basically, this person that doesn't think too well or just goes with the flow or whatever, or void of understanding, doesn't understand things but just do things, right? Striketh hands and becometh surety in the presence of his friends. So just by this action, just become it surety, it becomes an agreement, right? Or becomes received like in the presence of his friends. So you may receive this person as a friend too, right? In the presence of his friends. I think they touched on it. I think they said in Proverbs 5, 1 to 6. So anyway, um basically, striketh hands, shaketh hands, and you do so in the presence of the friend. Not everybody in the house of the Lord is a friend of God. And by shaking hands, oftentimes they get this message that you receive them. And so when they feel like they have a open space into your life, they feel like they are accepted. You can welcome people without touching people, but some people would rather shake hands. I believe it's more of like a cultural thing. I, being sanctified by the Lord, I prefer really not to touch the men, especially the men that I didn't grow up with. Like I grew up with my God dad, Uncle Smiley, so that's different, and my immediate family, like whatever. But all these the other people who are like distant relatives, really, because a lot of Jamaica, they're just distant cousins and stuff like that. But there's this Western thing that your family is just your immediate family, when really and truly your family is bigger than that. You have distant cousins, cousins, and etc., etc. Um, so you may shake hands or hug them and receive them, and you're thinking it's going to be a harmless thing, but you got to be wise, right? Be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. And some people may not know that. Young people may not know that. They may think this person just genuinely came into the house of the Lord and they really just mean God. Not everybody, as so we've learned in the news and throughout history, not everybody, especially with my life, not everybody means God when they come into the congregation, the house of the Lord, or the place of worship, or the mosque, or the synagogue. So if you could avoid that, as a young woman, because here, this Ian Main appears, and I was thinking he was some youth person that probably wants me for some activity. That's why he's asking me for my number. Turns out that's not what it was, right? And he said, I've been trying to catch you. um and so people may be shaking hands, or they may be touched by these people, and they're receiving these people just like the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites were deceitful, and basically Joshua made an agreement with them to let them live. But these Gibeonites, they weren't really about God, right? And he received them, and he couldn't go back on his word. That's how strong, like your word was, like your word is born or something like that. Your word was your word back then, right? And so he couldn't break that covenant. And so God doesn't like when you make a vow and break it. Okay, let your yea be yea and no be no. So he could not kill them. So he's receiving them based on whatever they presented and whatever. He didn't seek God. That's one thing I noticed about the failures of Joshua. Like, he didn't inquire of the Lord before, and he made certain decisions as a young leader. And this is what happens to him. The battle of Ai, where some men were lost. But then afterwards, he inquired of the Lord, and then he basically went through whatever. And I'm not too sure, but I believe they had to sanctify themselves. He went through whatever the tribes, the families, the households, and found out Achan and his household, got rid of that, and then they won the battle. So just be aware of that. Just when you go into the house of the Lord, the wheat and tares grow together. Some people are in there, they're big selfies, because remember, Satan is a selfie. He didn't care about the other angels. I want to exalt myself, or I'll exalt myself above the throne, or whatever it is that he said. You could be a Berean and look into that. But he was an I person, right? He was a big selfie. And Satanists and Satanism, it's self-centeredness, selfishness, and a lot of them just go by their feelings. Whatever you feel should be right. Like, love is love with the LGBTQ. It's not what God says love is, and God is love, and he dictates what love is. It's whatever they feel. That's how the wizards on the devices, they want you to go off whatever you feel. That's why you can't be deceived by whatever you feel, because then they will have you up and down, in and out, hot, then cold, yes, then no, fight, break up, kiss, make up. This is how you need to be rooted and grounded in God's love and God's thoughts towards your God-given spouse, and towards his people, and towards the congregation you're attending. Walk in love, walk in his word, build up yourself in the most holy faith, get words of life, and God's feelings on these people and on the matter, so you know how to treat them. So when the winds blow, you know how to treat them and address them, instead of just hardening your heart and just saying, hey, I don't want to be bothered, and go commit adultery or abandon them. Okay, so one of the things that's happening, and still on the topic, they are committing adultery, and some people don't know, right? Because some people end up being separated from their God-given spouse, didn't seek the Lord if God joined them together, and then decide to go date someone else, right? So I was at a time in my life where, you know what I should say? I'm gonna say it in this way because this is what I plan to do, and I feel like the wizard is trying to fight otherwise. So there's this young lady, and she wasn't dating. It was 2019. Not dating, not masturbating, not doing certain things, right? Just church homework or whatever, seeking God. And the Spirit of the Lord, she brought herself to the Lord, and the Spirit of the Lord led her to where it says, thou that teachest not to commit adultery, committest thou the adultery? Dost thou committest adultery? Um, Romans 2, verse 22. Romans 2, verse 22. So she brought herself to the Lord, asked God, I guess, if there's anything she needs to be sanctified from. And it says, thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? So that when that happened, it was like, what? She's not doing anything and whatever. And then the Spirit of the Lord started to teach her, lead her to scriptures like Matthew 19 or Mark 10 or Matthew 5, 27 to 32, whatever, whichever one, on or Luke 16:18, scriptures on adultery. And she was reading them closely, and then the Lord opened her eyes, and basically the except for fornication argument got brought down. And so basically, I already touched on that in prior videos. And so this can be what's happening in the house of the Lord. It happened to another brother who was going to fasting service. This elderly brother was going to fasting service, but his wife was 7-day Adventist. And so the spirits, the wizards, and the adulterers on the devices, hearing them, were fighting against, planning to fight against them by trying to put them in adultery. And so basically, he basically moved, divorced his wife, and married another. I guess just over something small, sometimes something so minor like that. And she was still doing God's will because that's a part of God's 10 Commandments. And your heart can be hardened because I guess maybe she wasn't attending services on a Sunday with him, or being much of like a presence there, and it may have affected him. Maybe there are the reasons that caused the hardening of his heart to go and marry another. And then I already told you about Ian Main. And so these wizards, when Satanists were on the devices, and the last time I believe I saw him was in 2014, and 2016 I was in Orlando, and 2017 you have that drama. And so within those years, that's what they're plotting to do: deceive and put people in adultery. And so you can be teaching not to commit adultery because the basic definition that a lot of people have is if a husband cheats on his spouse. And so I guess Satan was convincing him that, this couldn't be his God-given spouse because she's of a different whatever. So they're unequally yoked in his eyes, but it's not unequally yoked. She still believes in the God of Abraham and of Isaac. So it's the same God, worship just differently. And so instead of continuing in the marriage, he got a divorce, committed adultery, and other sad things happened that I just will not say because not everything is meant to be said. So I know that because I sought the Lord, that the second marriage is adulterous concerning him. So you can be just thinking, oh, hey, I'm not committing adultery because I didn't have a wedding ceremony, so I'm not in a marriage, and so whatever, and you go talk to another person and don't know that you're committing adultery. Or you decide, oh, to talk yourself out of your God-given marriage because of little discrepancies, you harden your heart. Read Matthew 19, 1 to 9. Because of the hardness of the heart, Moses gave the bill of divorcement. So you decide to get divorced and try to go off to another woman, and you think that because things seem to be going so well, remember even Samson, he shook himself like other times, shook himself and thought it would be like other times, and he did not know that the Spirit of the Lord departed from him, and so certain things started. Well, so the bad things start happening, right? And I noticed, even like certain bad things would start to happen. You just don't know why, because you're accepting and embracing either adultery or adulterous people, and God is not with adultery. So you're being a friend of the world who is adulterous, and God is not adulterous. And so um I don't even want to touch on what that man lost, but when I checked it out, the Lord led me to in Revelation to let me know that it's due to the adultery why the loss happened. But I'm not gonna go into much. Not everything is meant to be said. But I'm just giving an example that these Satanists, wizards, and adulterers in the country acting like they're not doing anything. Oh, they're doing a lot. They're doing witchcraft to curse you, curse the church, curse the Christians because they hate Christians, because Satan hates Christians and hate godly people, curse Muslims, curse Jews. That's what they're doing. That, the war in the Middle East and the excessive back and forth between Israel and Lebanon and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, all of that is satanic. God would want them to dwell peacefully one with another, right? So um this is how these Satanists and wizards roll. And there's a beauty about the Middle East. There's a beauty, especially because it's like a place where God bless, and the seed of Abraham, and a lot of the seed of Abraham, they tend to have wisdom and knowledge and peacefulness. And you see the certain Arabs that are spiritual and godly. It's just a beautiful thing. I'm glad I had the opportunity to go to Dubai and see the Emiratis. Beautiful. And there are people who are there. They may not be the traditional Emirati, but they're Indian and Pakistani, and they're godly and they're sweet. They'll look out for you. um, but not everybody is perfect. I'm not saying everybody there is perfect. But when you walk with the Lord, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. He'll help you on your journey to see things that you've never seen before. So you may be teaching, don't commit adultery, but yet you may be endorsing a marriage to happen in your congregation and not know that it's adulterous. Um, so this is how adultery seeps into the church, and a little leaven, except especially the except for fornication argument. The little leaven leaveneth a whole lump. Okay, and I'm going to end on this note: masturbation. Jeremiah 2, verse 27. All right, verse 27. All right, saying to a stock, thou art my father, and to a stone, thou hast brought me forth. For they have turned their back unto me, and not their face, but in the time of their trouble they will say, arise and save us. But where are thy gods that thou hast made thee? Let them arise, if they can save thee in the time of thy trouble, for according to the number of thy cities are thy gods, O Judah. So this is verse 27 and 28. So they were committing adultery with stocks and stones, right? They were dwelling with them the way they should dwell with God. They were inquiring of whatever with these stocks and stones. They were dwelling with them. When we dwell with God, we have a form of a spiritual marriage, right? And so they were dwelling with these stocks and stones in a marital way. Now on masturbation, what's happening, because people don't really touch on that. You don't really hear this as a topic of discussion or a preaching in a Pentecostal apostolic church so much. Masturbation, some may have discussions on this at a retreat instead of on a Sunday morning service or a Wednesday night Bible study. But I'm going to share with you, like, masturbation, it's really a selfie thing. And so basically you're dwelling with your hand and you're saying to your hand, just like Israel or Judah actually was dwelling with the stocks and stones and saying, "Thou art my father," right? And saying to them, "Thou hast brought me forth." So you're dwelling with your hand. Pay attention. You could be a Berean. You can investigate for yourself. You can ask God to show you. You can seek God yourself on the topic. But you're dwelling with your hand. And you're saying to your hand, "Thou art my husband." Hello? "Thou art my wife." Because it's pretty much performing in what way that you're supposed to be doing with your wife. Now, I'm not talking about when married people are together and the sexologist or counselor told, or sex counselor said that, to get things started, if you're in this position sexually and you're having difficulty, that you would start, using your hand in certain ways to start things up that should lead to sex the way God intended between a man and a woman, and bring forth with the end product also in mind of being a godly seed, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you are not with your God-given spouse and you're masturbating or you're watching pornography, and you're looking at the woman in a lustful way, like is in Matthew 5, I believe it's either 27, 28, or 29, one of them. And you are lusting after the woman to dwell with her um, in a marital way, which is adulterous. And so when you're saying to your hand, "Oh, I just got my hand," or they have dildos, that's adulterous. That's almost like dwelling with a stone in a marital sexual way. It's just a dildo that's made for sexual purposes. You do not need a dildo. But they use it for, I guess it becomes, they're starting to abuse their organs, and some women or some men start to basically abuse their sexual organs and manipulate it to make them feel a feel, or to relieve them of a feeling, or to make them feel a feel that feels good, instead of praying, instead of focusing on doing God's will, instead of doing something constructive in the house, instead of taking a shower, or instead of doing something, that reading your scripture, doing something good for the neighbor. So they become self-centered instead of not being selfish or self-centered, and they should become selfless. The more you get closer to God, you're supposed to be this selflessly loving person that do things without wanting anything in return. Um, so remember, the kingdom of Satan is a selfishness, and then selfies and all this kind of you don't want to be one big selfie. And then if you do that for years, right, this kind of masturbation for years, by the time you get into your marriage, you're molding yourself to think how sex is supposed to go for you. You're not thinking selflessly about the other person. You're not thinking in love or the way sex is supposed to be between the both of you. You're thinking more on a selfish level, like it's just supposed to please me. That's why I don't agree with these YouTube videos. I hope they take them down, like these women with their husband, and they would push down their husband's head um, because they like oral sex. I don't agree with oral sex. There are other ways to get stimulation, I believe, in the marriage, but I don't agree with oral sex because it's not hygienic. That's not safe. That's not a safe practice. Um, and I don't agree with that form of disrespect. But because it becomes a selfish thing, they become so disrespectful to someone's son, and I don't agree with that. And so it's sex is when it happens, it's supposed to be done in love, with both parties caring for one another in a selfless manner. But you can speak to a counselor on it, a Christian counselor, or someone who is more of the faith when it comes to, and they're a sexologist or whatever, and they will probably have a greater revelation or understanding of it. But I know it's not supposed to be a selfish thing because God is not selfish. So no, I don't agree with masturbation. And then I already discussed the spilling of your seed, especially as a man, Genesis 38. And so God called us to sanctification. These are things that are not pleasing. These are things that are adulterous before him. These are things that are not good. So, yes. Um, and this is how adultery can be in the church, because some people may think like the wizard on the device, what they would tell the young middle school people is like, experiment with yourself and do all of this. And a lot of these satanist wizards or whoever they are that have millions of dollars and they're billionaires because they're putting hidden surveillance in homes, even with the Airbnbs. It's on the news that some people find hidden cameras, and so they're putting some of them can be putting marital couples or people who get together and they're adulterous or whatever, and they're shacking up or smashing or whatever, and they have sex in that home or in that place where there's a hidden surveillance, and the person on behind the device is recording it and then putting them in adultery. And so their bodies having sex is on some kind of video somewhere in the world, and they're making money off of it. Remember, pornography is a billion-dollar industry. This is why I believe that the president should do a federal ban against adultery, because some people are actually dating people and putting them in pornography behind their back. And God is not with that, right? Because you're discovering pornography in Leviticus 20, they're discovering another man's nakedness. It's not their place to be there. It's sexual theft. They shouldn't be there. It's wrong, and that's happening. So some of these young people, they may be masturbating, and then some wizard may have some hidden surveillance in their apartment or in their home. Who knows? Because these people have money, they may try to they sometimes somebody lose their key and they have to get another key, and they wonder why they lost their key. Sometimes these wizards may get the key and come into the house, and it's like somebody else comes in when you're not there. Stuff like that can happen in the USA and Western world. So it's better to just ban pornography. But I guess, it may upset a lot of Satanists and wizards who are about that sexual immorality, exploration kind of thing, and doing sexual foolishness and sexual stupidness. So I wouldn't advise to do those things. And just, you become in a way you become an abuser of yourself with mankind, because you are abusing your body, you're manipulating it for sexual reasons. When you are masturbating, you don't need to touch those organs at that time. You don't plan to have a child. You're not with your God-given spouse. So what are you doing? Okay. So these are little ways where adulterous things or adultery can come into the church. And remember, adultery is more than just the spouse cheating on the husband, another spouse, and go marrying another. The adultery have spiritual adultery, the departing, which that adultery is departing from God's will or God and yielding your members to another thing, which is also translated to spiritual adultery. And then spiritual adultery is basically leaving God and his will and his way, backsliding, and yielding your members to something else, like stocks and stones, as Israel did. So God, we are called to have a good relationship, a close relationship with God in a sanctified and holy way, bearing our vessels in sanctification and honor. And I say these things because people are not teaching on them. And you can always seek the Lord, and He may reveal more to you than what I have said. You may identify adultery happening in various forms in the USA that I may have not listed. But the more you get closer to God and you see how you're supposed to live for Him and live with your spouse, the more your eyes are open to certain things. Like, you would see certain things that are idolatrous and adulterous, and identify that more. The closer you get to God, the more His light shines, the more you see sin in the world that you have to come out from and be separated. Okay. So these are ways, adultery can come into the church and you just don't know. Okay.